guess I'm short too. I'm just 5'6". Actually, 6.5. Good afternoon, Prime Minister Harris, Prime Minister Gaston Brown, Your Excellencies, Member of the Parliament, dear colleagues, friends, ladies and gentlemen. We had a difficult year, and the year ahead is going to be somewhat challenging. We had several price adjustments, and more may be needed. We have failed projects, probably more in the making. Some have tried to self-regulate the industry. It was and it is an initiative from the private sector. In my opinion, this must be addressed by the governments and the CIUs. Our industry is processing too few applications and a small fraction of what it should. It appears our industry is not unaffected by fake news and disinformation, and some are trying to paint us with a brush of distrust and corruption. More than any time, the industry and the governments must stand and collaborate and work together, united. We have today the head of CIUs from St. Kitts and Nevis, Grenada, Dominica, St. Lucia, and we have a CIU representative from Antigua and Barbuda. Mr. Les Khan, Keisha is not, Emmanuel Nanthan, Ambassador Emmanuel Nanthan, Mr. Nestor Alfred, and Casford King from CIU Antigua. So let's see what our panelists have to say and what they have planned for us. Our time was reduced from 45 minutes to 30, and we'll have only 10 minutes for questions. So my first question would be, how do you, various head of CIUs, view the concept of having a single regulatory for various OECD's programs, Mr. Khan?
We are a product and an industry that's growing. And if you take this industry, like any other industry in banking, regulations evolved. And regulations started with an association. And I believe that we're heading in that direction. As we go forward, as we become more mature in our product, as the association of SIPA gets its feet into operating in a unified manner, we will be able to leverage other associations to help us regulate as we go forward.
Emmanuel, any thought on this?
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Good morning to all. It's a pleasure being here representing Dominica. Congrats to the organizers of this very impressive conference. I believe, as Les said, the industry has been evolving, and we are faced with a number of challenges. In Dominica, for instance, recently, we brought on board on our staff a consultant who came from the correspondent banks side of the business from the US to work with us, to try not just to put our appreciation for the risk involved with the business in line with the other programs in the Caribbean, but also in line with the appetite, the risk appetite for the banks, both locally, originally, and our correspondent banks. Because the business has been going on for a while, and more it evolves. And we want to ensure that as a business, as an industry, we do the things that are best and have best practice, not just for the program, but for the country. The program is too important for the countries of the Caribbean. It's too important for our economies to take any chances with those. In Dominica, for instance, we just came from the effects of Hurricane Maria, where we had winds of over 220 miles an hour, where our entire GDP was washed away within a few hours. And we saw the sufferings and the pain and the labor of every man, woman, and child. No one was saved from the ravage and the rampage of Maria. In fact, one of the first houses I saw on social media was the Prime Minister's statement that he too had lost his roof. A few hours after that, I lost mine. So we know the importance and significance of the program in helping us to rebuild our country. And in ensuring that we do those things, we have to ensure that we leave no stone unturned in protecting the integrity of the program. If it means we work together with St. Lucia, with St. Kitts, Grenada, and anywhere else, and there may be other countries in the Caribbean that may come up with programs as well, but we need, as a Caribbean people, to work together. We are used to working together as a people. We have the same Caribbean CARICOM passport. We have the same Eastern Caribbean central currency. We use the same central banks. So we as a people, a Caribbean people, coming down from the years, crossing the Atlantic, crossing the oceans, from Africa coming down here, we have lived together. We understand what the challenges are. We understand, when I was cutting my hair at the barber shop in Dominica yesterday or 2 days ago, the barber, who was a Haitian, was discussing with a local Dominican on the leaders of the Haitian Revolution and where they came from, who was from Grenada and who was from Haiti, etc. So we have had over centuries work together as a Caribbean people. We have had over centuries associated with each other. We have fought, we have survived, and we have evolved as a people. That remains true today as it was 100 years ago. And I'm sure the people of the region, the leaders of the region, will give support to that to ensure that we as a region fight together, work together for the elevation of every man, woman, child, boy, and girl.
Thank you. Well, on the same front, you mentioned banking. Maybe a question to Mr. King here from Antigua. What would be a common front from the banking in this issue? Because we are facing all transfers of funds to the region. How could you maybe find a common front on that, working together?
Hello. Thank you for hosting us. It's really been a wonderful conference so far. This is an example of working together in terms of what we're seeing here today. This is a clear example of collaboration. On the issue of the banking challenges that we have, when you sit and you look at it and you do your SWOT analysis and you realize your strengths, your weaknesses, your opportunities, and your threats, what is common is that we all have the similar challenges. Our strengths are in promoting our program, ensuring that we add to the economic survival of each country, which by extension leads to a greater development in terms of our region. So united we stand, and divided we shall fall. Now, when you look at the banking issues that we are facing, they are very common. Now, for me, working closely with this issue, it's very dear to me. We're understanding that the external challenges are synonymous to all of us. Now, every time you think that you have a clear handle of it, the parameters, they shift on you. So for me and for all of my colleagues who are in the same position, we can make representations to these international agencies such as our corresponding banks and see if there are any possible ways that they could assist us in ensuring that we cooperate because we're all fighting for the same common goal. So from that vantage point, I would encourage that we forge even closer collaboration in terms of fighting these intrinsic challenges that we're facing.
Thank you. Well, this seems to be one common. What are the other common approaches that you could have?
Could I just say?
Oh, you would add on,
yes,
please.
Let me just have a word on the issue of banking. I think that if we look at some global trends, we are seeing a strong tendency to move away from the US dollar as a reserve currency and as a currency of international transaction. So to mitigate, it seems to me, some of the difficulties we have in there with respect to the correspondence banking is to, as it were, shift slightly away from the US dollar. Of course, there's a session later on that deals with cryptocurrency. It may be that we should move in that direction, and probably the central bank may wish to explore the possibility of moving in that direction. In the region, of course, we have in recent time, about 2 or 3 months ago, the development of the, what do you call it, the petro in Venezuela, to get away from that difficulty. Russia, China, they're all moving in that direction because once you face those sanctions, it means that your transactions that are conducted in US dollars would not be able to go through. So it seems to me that certainly in the future, we need to give some thought to that.
Thank you. Well, this was my next question, as do, have you considered payments other than US dollar, cryptocurrency, euro, pounds, or maybe having accounts outside of this area where applicants could transfer money in other currencies, and this will minimize maybe the implication of correspondent banks. Lester?
Thank you, Sam. The issues of the banking sector within the OECS region or in the Caribbean region at large are real issues. There are issues for CBI's programs. The de-risking issues in itself impacts in a very significant way for CBI programs to survive in the long term. The question as to whether we look at alternatives is something that has to be considered. Unfortunately, within the OECS islands, the only bank that is prepared to undertake any business transactions with the CBI programs are our national banks. Unfortunately, our national banks do not operate on a multi-currency platform. Therefore, this in itself presents some challenges for them. The question is, in some of the region, there is a vibrant offshore sector where there are numerous private banks that does present us with the opportunity to have that type of platform. But I believe from a wider perspective, the issue of unity, specifically in regard to the CBI programs and how we deal with the issues of alternative payments, the issues of de-risking, the issues of limited access to the banking sector in our regions, calls for the unity of the individual CBIs to come together and to deal with this matter in a more real and strategic way. So from my perspective, I believe that we now have to define the next, we have to give a definition to the next step of unity. And what does it call for? And I believe that individually, we may not be very successful in dealing with the issues of the banking challenges that we have. But I think if we come together, not just St. Lucia dealing with the issues, Grenada, but if we come together as one to deal with those issues, it'd be a lot better. So a very good example, in my own efforts to look at alternative banking outside of the Caribbean region, I approached a particular bank and given the small numbers of applications that St. Lucia now has before it, they didn't see it as a very lucrative business for them. But guess what? If all of us had gone to this one bank and speak with one voice, I am sure that we would have obtained that alternative banking platform. So these are the real issues that we have to face. And I believe, Sam, that the leaders of this region who are present here today have really set the tone. And I think it's left for us now to define the next step.
Thank you. Les?
Can I add?
Yes.
We're, as heads of the units, as Nestor mentioned, we're all facing this issue about payments and getting the payments in. And we all try to come on our own to find solutions. Dominica, Antigua, ourselves. We recently passed regulations about a month and a half ago that allows our program to take payments in non-US dollars. So this is something we will be moving towards. But this is part of the issue that we face with in terms of non-unity, because we need to be sharing the experiences and how we facilitate that. Another angle that we are considering is taking payments for due diligence in Dubai. Now, I am aware that a number of our programs are doing this. We need to be able to share that information, right? So while we are trying to solve our individual problems, we know that there are solutions out there. We just need to be able to share. And I hope that as we move forward, we'll be able to capitalize on the knowledge and the skill set that we bring together as the heads of the CPI programs.
Thank you.
Yeah, could I just add to that?
Please.
We have a strong history of regional collaboration, certainly at the level of the OECS, and we can, mention a number of institutions, the Central Bank, the OECS, and a number of regional initiatives we have taken. But at the same time, there's historical evidence where that collaboration breaks down. And I think what triggers that breakdown is a clash between your national sovereignty and, in order to have the regional collaboration, the necessity to surrender some of that sovereignty. A classic illustration would have been, I don't know, about a decade and a half ago, the decision was taken to have a common head tax on the cruise ship passengers. It was agreed upon. Strong desire to collaborate. And it collapsed weeks thereafter when one country pulls out. So it seems to me one of the difficulties we'd have to come to terms with is what degree of sovereignty we need to surrender, even to have the regional regulatory body for us to move forward on that. I think one way we can begin the process is to look at the possibility of having some procedural commonality in how we process, how we deal with the program. That could be a starting point where we can build from and have the regional regulatory body. But it seems to me that some degree of surrender of sovereignty would have to take place.
I would also like to add that late last year, a number of the Prime Ministers, Chastity and Prime Minister Harris, and a number of representatives from the CBI programs, including the head of the ECCB, visited a number of Canadian banks to engage in educating them in our due diligence process, because the whole issue is about compliance and ensuring that we have clean funds coming in. We continue with that dialogue, and the ECCB has taken the lead. Governor Antoine has had meetings, and I know he's continuing to engage. And that's where the ECCB plays a role. There is another angle, as we talk about the national banks. At some point, we have to look at the national banks becoming one national bank for the OECS, because there is power in combining the resources.
Thank you. Well, staying on the same subject about money, how do you see a common approach to dealing with the OECD's position about CRS versus second citizenship or alternative citizenship? Any comment on that? What would you do with CRS, common reporting?
No, I was one of those persons when, a few years ago, when I was the chief regulator for St. Lucia's financial services sector. And at that time, the OECD was absolutely relentless in destroying the sector. And they were successful to a great extent. And my own experience was one where around the Global Forum table, you had the individual islands who had offshore, but an offshore sector or regime, were all individually providing positions on how the individual offshore regime was different from the other, how it differed in issue of transparency, how it differed in issues of regulation. And I sat there and I'm saying, this can't be right. Because among ourselves, we were differentiating ourselves, but there were common issues that we had to deal with. There were issues that in certain islands, the regulatory framework was not very strong enough because they didn't have the capacity and the skill sets. There were others where it was adequate. There were others where it was stronger. But I think where the islands missed was the opportunity to create that single regulator where we could have amassed the various brains and strengths in the various islands to come together and to regulate the offshore sector, rather than sitting around a global forum table making reference and distinctions between our individual islands, almost as a means of trying to survive outside of the wider space. And I can see the same thing happening with the CBI program, where each of us on the international stage, on the regional stage, we boast of our individual programs being gold, platinum, silver, but there are common threads among all of us. There are common weaknesses among all of us. But I believe if there is going to be sustainability for this program, it cannot be each of us sitting around the table speaking about the differences and strengths of our program when there are common threads. I think we need to come together and deal with these issues specifically in regard to the OECD's position on the individual islands CBI programs and residency programs being a scheme to circumvent the reporting under the common reporting standards. And from my own experience, I believe the only way that we can deal with this particular situation is not singly. The only way we can deal with this is by coming together. And I believe that there have been approaches where there is commonality with various aspects of the process in regard to due diligence. But I believe that the quicker we make the step towards creating a single framework to deal with the vetting, to deal with the due diligence issues, I think we're spinning in mud. So from a technocrat perspective, I think we need to move towards creating that single regulatory space. And what it's going to do as well is going to bring a greater level of integrity to each of our passports. It will send a very strong message to our promoters that they can't play one against the other. That if St. Lucia takes 200 days to give an application, you can't then say, I'm going to go to another island where it takes 3 months. Absolutely, that will not happen. So therefore, there'll be a common approach, and the promoters and the authorized agents would have to understand that there is a process that streams right through the individual islands. In regard to how we deal with the sharing of the revenue stream, we can do this. If we can have a central bank, having one regulator for the CBI program is a joke. It can be done. So I firmly believe that a time has come for us to look seriously in regard to coming together in a very tangible way to deal with the issue of the OECD. Because if we don't do this, I think the same thing will happen with our offshore sector. And as our Prime Minister Harris said, solidarity, in this particular case, there ought to be no boundaries.
Thank you. In regard to unity and common standards, we're going to have a panel on ethical framework in global marketing. But what are your thoughts about all these marketing that's been done about your programs by different promoters, advertisements, and promotional material? People promising, guaranteeing the process. Maybe Nanthan, you want to address this issue? Marketing the program, maybe having common standards, giving agents and service providers to stand by when they are promoting your brands, your country's name, your citizenship?
I believe that the question of marketing of the program, the industry, it's not and should never be a wash your foot and come industry. We shouldn't be able to market the program in what we would say in local Dominican parlance as willy-nilly. It should be done in a high-class way. The industry is one where our clients, the investors, are people of high net worth, and they should be treated in such a way. We need to have the personalized touch in the responding and dealing with our investors and our agents. We need to ensure that all what needs to be done is done to prevent gossip and to prevent bad eggs in the industry. Global situations resulted in an increase in demand for people wanting to move or wanting to travel easier. You have, of course, the Middle Eastern crisis. You have in China, where you have a large market, you have an over-subscription of the US EB5 program, and as such, it has become now, there's a delay of 8 to 10 years. So the Chinese people who want to move themselves, they are looking for other options. In the Middle East, with Iraq, with Syria, with Iran, with Jordan, with Saudi Arabia, and all the countries there's uncertainty, and there are more and more people looking to and wanting to move. In the US, the tax situation, when we have investors from the US, the people who don't want to be charged tax on the worldwide income. So there is a demand for the program. We have to ensure that as leaders in the global industry, we manage ourselves in such a way that we're not looking for a kill. We're not moving too fast. But we try to understand and work in such a way that the program is well regulated. We have control of the people who we have as agents, and we deal with those people. Our agents have international promoters. We want people to not deal with anybody who is not registered on our site. So we try to do those things. Earlier on, you made mention of other currencies. Yes, I think we are all moving towards accepting other currencies, but we don't want to give the impression that we're trying to do things to facilitate the movement of funds illegally. That's not it at all. The industry is a sensitive one. Every day you travel around, and we at the units, we do very frequently. We met last month, maybe in Vietnam or maybe in Mumbai. With many people here, we were in China together a month ago. So we know that there's a lot of fluidity in the industry. What we try to do, we meet as CIPA, regional organization, we meet quarterly, and sometimes we invite our foreign partners, stakeholders, to discuss with us. GRFCC wasn't at this meeting this time, but hopefully they will be there at the next meeting. The central bank was at the last meeting we had in St. Kitts in December. So we try to discuss, to share ideas. Yesterday, there was a very good presentation by a particular person on the idea of looking at the possibility of using biometrics, or using a company that could do biometrics for us all over the world, globally. So anybody who applies, we could get an authentic fingerprint that could be shared easily, electronically, around. So really and truly, we don't want to give the impression that it's a wash your foot and come. We don't want to market the industry as something that is free for all. But we want to seek collaboration and seek support from all those who care and work with us to ensure that we set standards that are controllable and standards that will keep the industry and keep the industry for all of us regulated in a way that could be manageable and could protect the integrity of all programs and the security of our region.
But I think for the sake of the programs, you need clear guidelines as to marketing agent promoters are following, so make sure that the product or the citizenship here is being, because the steps here or the process is being commoditized, and therefore in order to minimize this image, you need to create standards how we are promoting it. So I think it would be nice to have some common grounds as to what we can or cannot do. For example, many years ago, I remember in Canada, we had to, in Dubai, we had to submit our advertisement to the embassy to approve it, and only then we could advertise it. It is your brand, it's your, so you must control it. On a different subject, we all try to maximize income or money to stay on the islands. There seems to be various degrees of commissions which are paid. Are you intend to also have a common ground as to how much a promoter is going to be paid, either commissions by government or by different real estate projects? Any thoughts on that?
If I, I'm sorry, may I? With the most mature real estate market, you know, we have the largest number of approved real estate projects. Our position has always been that any agreement between a developer and the client is his agreement. And legally, if a client wants to engage, as one service provider told me a while back, buyer beware. However, the reputation of our programs is at stake, no matter what we do and whatever our legal position is. So I think as we engage, and we are doing it here in St. Kitts and Nevis, we are speaking to our developers. We are looking at the standards that they have. We have a technical committee that monitors the levels of development, the standards that they have, and the stage at which they are. With the implementation of the escrow bill, we are also monitoring that. So to put things in perspective, yes, there needs to be some guidance there, but it's a very tough piece to regulate on how much commission is paid, because a lot of times we don't know what the agreement is between the developer and the agent.
But shouldn't you control how much money is invested actually in your country?
It's a tough one, I would say.
Obviously, it should be in your interest to make sure you maximize money staying in. Antigua, you guys have a lot of real estate projects.
The thing is, I mean, a lot of these.
It's working.
Yeah, sure. The regulation of these projects, I mean, as much as you try to ensure that you're on top of these projects, I mean, there are other avenues, there are other ways that people can circumvent whatever you may have in place. Now, the issue is that you have to ensure that once you monitor these projects and ensure that you're getting quality in return for the investment, and you ensure that you protect the integrity of your passport, obviously, because your passport is tied to the level of investment. Many times, the persons that are involved, they are able to do, what do you call it, financial engineering, which you really don't have any control over. I mean, it's difficult. We try our best to ensure that we stay on top of it, but it's difficult. I mean, if you look at it from a holistic standpoint, we can do our best. I mean, we ensure that we adhere to strict international standards. Management of the escrow account and all of that, I mean, as we heard previously, that is something that we have to stay on top of.
Yeah, because considering now almost 4 of the countries here have the same threshold, 200,000. So it would be nice if you guys could have the same percentage, you know, and it would standardize and make sure that people don't come to us as promoters and trying to say, well, we can give you more, push them more here, or a little less. So I think that would be a nice common standard to have among you. Nestor?
Let me just say this to it, that I think while I'm in agreement with you in part, I think we need to inject a certain amount of frankness in the discussion on the CBIs. It seems to me that it's quite clear that we are all in competition. That's clear, yeah? And to pretend otherwise would be to fool ourselves. The local agents are in competition with one another. The marketing agents are in competition with one another, yeah? And of course, in competition, you try to differentiate yourself, yeah? Now, once you do that, it seems to me that you would eventually, given the size of our programs, end up in a race to the bottom. Therefore, what we may have to consider doing is not the competition that is a cutthroat competition, and it brings me back to the theme of the panel discussion, but a collaborative competition. You can collaborate and be competitive. In other words, competitiveness does not exclude collaboration. So I think there is where we need to find some grounds where we can collaborate and at the same time be competitive. All of us are in competition. The local agents are in competition. The marketing agents are in competition.
Thank you. Well, we have about 9 minutes left to give the floor to some questions. If there's any questions, there are microphones at each end. Yes? Could you present yourself? Is it working?
As soon as I get sound, yeah.
Yes.
Thomas Anthony, I represent Exeter. Good afternoon, gentlemen. Sam. Recently, Mr. Chris Willis published a paper in IMC calling for a role for the Caribbean community, for CARICOM. The thesis being these passports are all the same, Caribbean community passports, and individual decisions, country decisions, has implications for the region. He called for, among other things, for the Caribbean community to have a vetting role, essentially that they be provided with the DD results, with information on each applicant, and that they be allowed to provide some feedback before a decision is rendered by any country.
Your question faster. There's only 7 minutes left.
I'm getting into it, Sam, yes.
Yeah, so
So
a
my
question,
question
not an
is,
introduction.
I just want to get some feedback from each of you in terms of that approach. Thanks.
So the question
You
is,
know, I had the
Well,
opportunity
I'm
of
not-
reading that particular
sorry.
paper,
Yeah.
and I think the IMC somehow may have missed the difference between the OECS and CARICOM at large. Within OECS, there's free movement of labor and capital. That doesn't exist within the CARICOM wider region. And therefore, I believe the issues of CBI is a matter for the OECS islands. I support the idea of having that platform that can participate in the process of vetting and reviewing and the due diligence component. But from my perspective, I don't think it has to come from the CARICOM level. It can come from the OECS level. And that's my major difference with this paper. And the issue of understanding that the common space is really in regard to the OECS.
thank you. Well, we're gonna, if there's any other questions, maybe if you can, while you prepare yourself, anybody else want to further comment on this for a minute?
I was just thinking aloud that I haven't seen the paper and read the paper, but it seems to me that the issue of a passport is a national issue, quite separate and apart from CARICOM. Similarly, in the EU, yes, the British issue their passport, and it's an EU passport, but it's a British, essentially. So I'm not sure that the EU or CARICOM can regulate it. So I'm not sure that if one particular program operates in such a way that it endangers the passport that it issued, Grenada say, that the rest of the passports are in danger.
Thank you.
I don't, it's a national sovereign issue.
Well, sir, can you
Yes,
present
sorry.
yourself?
I just want to support the idea of the unified process, but I am always mindful that a Nevis polymango is not the same as a St. Lucia mango. Having said that, we can talk as much as we like about this commonality and so on. I strongly believe that we ought to, each country got to spend their energies promoting what they think they can do best. My question really might have been directed to the earlier panel. I know we keep talking about the beauty of CBI, and we spend a lot of time looking at the economic aspect of it. But what concerns me most, and I just did a little quick calculation, if you make about $2 billion in a CBI program, selling at about 200,000, it's about 5,000 new residents. So on the, not necessarily the economic side, but on the social side, you know what concerns me? And I want to find out from this panel whether or not a citizen has the same right, power, privilege, responsibility as the other citizens. And why I say that on the social side, I'm concerned that if they have the same rights and privileges, whether or not one of these days, while we are racing to generate revenue, we will be racing to eliminate our population. I leave that to you.
Thank you. Well, I wouldn't think eliminate would dilute, maybe.
So-
Any
some-
differences
just a
between?
ping pong here. As much as the mango from Nevis may taste different from the mango from St. Lucia, you know what the beauty is? Those mangoes are from the OECS, and that's where the focus has to be.
Thank you. So differences between citizenship in different countries. We start, Nestor.
Product
that-
differentiation.
So differentiation in citizenship, these economic citizens, do they have the same rights? Is there different? Are they
Yes.
different in St. Lucia?
Whether they are citizens under the CBI programs or citizens through the normal
By birth.
process of by birth, they are citizens and they have the same rights and responsibilities, just like any other ordinary citizen in St. Lucia. And I
Well,
think the same applies to the rest of the OECS
No, I
region.
think St. Lucia, if economic citizens, if they have children, they're not automatically a citizen. You need to apply for them. Well, in Grenada, they're automatically citizens, and if you marry a non-Grenadian, they will be given citizenship. How is it in St. Kitts?
In St. Kitts, an economic citizen, as we refer to them, has all the rights of a citizen, a born citizen, except the right to vote. And that's the differentiation.
So they cannot all move here one day by plane loads and say, we want to take over, we're going to elect our own people. No? Not possible.
Not at this point in
Not
time.
at this point in time. Good. Anyway, I think you guys are revising your electoral laws, so make sure that stays that way.
Well, another
Dominica?
crucial distinction too is that the citizenship can be revoked,
Yes.
whereas a citizen who's a born citizen, you can't revoke that. So there is still possibility of any desire to, as
Well,
it
some
were, take
countries are
over.
trying to get that legislation to revoke citizenship. But I think let's just stick on the fact that what are the differences? Dominica, any?
A citizen is a citizen.
A citizen is a citizen is a citizen. That was Prime Minister Skirt said 3-4 years ago. Good. Antigua?
Same thing in Antigua.
So if an economic citizen of Antigua has children after they obtained or they were naturalized citizens, would those children be able to apply and obtain citizenship and passport?
Currently, no.
So there's differences there.
Well, we're looking at that. We're in the process of reviewing
And
that.
Grenada, I think I gave the answer.
Yeah, I think the issue is whether or not you were born in Grenada and acquired citizenship as distinct from the acquisition of citizenship through the program.
Okay, well, let's talk about now loss of citizenship. I've seen in the past in St. Kitts, applicants were asked to surrender their passports only, but not their citizenship, because of various things they've done, bad boys or girls. How can they lose their citizenship in St. Kitts, in St. Lucia?
How can they?
Is there any possibility or measure for them
There-
to
there are.
revoke? There was a news a couple of months ago that 6 people were revoked their citizenship.
Yeah, yeah.
How did that happen? Can it happen again?
Of course it can happen again.
How?
There are provisions in St. Lucia's citizenship by investment legislation. There's a provision that highlights 4 areas under which such citizenship can be revoked. If you supplied information which was then later found to be wrong, for want of a better word, if you engage in any issues that can cause national security risk for the island. So there are prescribed conditions under which those revocations can be revoked. And in the case of the 6 revocations, those persons fell foul of those provisions, and therefore St. Lucia had no choice but to revoke those citizenships.
Good for them. St. Kitts.
Similar to St. Lucia, conditions for revocation would be security risks, both to the country and our international partners, reputational risk, and if an individual actually lied on the application form and we subsequently found out about it, we can revoke citizenship. We do reserve the right, as we do with any citizen, to revoke the passport.
Yes. Dominica.
There are limited areas in which you could revoke for giving false information is one area.
Misrepresentation.
Yes.
Antigua.
On that one, we have standardization. We're all common in that area from in the different territories.
Well, thank you very much. This is the end. Our time is lapsed. Thank you for listening. Thank you for the questions. Thank you for being here. Thank you, sirs.